Welcome to Music Student 101. We almost forgot. We have a few more things to say about modulation to closely related keys. And how to know when you hear them. So ready your theory brains. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Hello to all of our listeners, students and music enthusiasts.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to Music Student 101. It is I, Jeremy Burns, your humble producer.
Yeah, so formal this time.
Yes, and who are you?
I am Matthew Scott Phillips, your humble theorist and composer.
How are you feeling today, Matt?
I'm all right. I've been a little under the weather for a little while, so apologies if my voice sounds a little stuffy. Feeling much better today, though, so we're powering through.
Does the good doctor need a good doctor?
Maybe so. or a good bowl of chicken soup or something.
A good hot bath?
Yeah.
That usually knocks it out.
Yeah, or at least makes you feel better for a while.
And then, before we get into some of these listener mails, I want to share a story with you today.
Okay.
It's story time at the top of the episode.
Time.
There's a little bit of a lesson to be learned in this. I learned a lesson, and I want to share this with some of our listeners. Perhaps they can learn a lesson, and there's some cool synchronicities involved in this story.
Okay.
So dig it. A couple of weeks ago, I worked on a job which I consider to be my worst work ever.
Oh, my God.
It was a very important board meeting for a very big cola beverage company.
Okay. Who shall remain nameless?
Yes, probably should. And I was the sound engineer. They were doing the board of directors meeting, and there was a 3-man video crew, or 3 shooters, and me doing sound.
Yeah.
The kind of tape I was using to put the microphones on these executives and CEOs' jackets was coming unstuck from their fine cloth materials.
I see.
And throughout most of the time, the microphone was rubbing up against the tie. And I couldn't get up there in the middle of the meeting and say, "Hey, everyone, stop!"
Knock it off. Yeah.
And take the mic and fix the mic. So I just had to kind of sit there in pain and torment while I heard all these crackling and crackling sounds. So I decided I was going to take the files and be like, look to the director. I was like, I'm going to go ahead and do some post work on this before I send it over to you.
Mm-hmm.
And nervously got on my computer and started opening up these files, and they sounded just as bad as they did the day of the shoot. But right around that time, I was talking back and forth a little bit with Craig Brandwine,
right,
who we had on our last episode.
Yes,
the composition for film episode.
Yes, that was a good one.
And he really enjoyed the episode, by the way. And our friend Dr. Panion over at UAB also did, and so maybe we'll be hearing more from those guys about that. But I happened to mention my situation to Craig. And he says, "Oh, hey, man, come on over. I do a lot of post-audio, and I might can help you fix this." And here's another synchronicity. The software he had been working with and was talking about was a software that I had just recently purchased. It's called Isotope RX7. Which is an audio cleaning software.
Okay.
It is not cheap. The advanced version cost me $800.
This thing better clean up audio software a mother.
It got me to where I could send the product that I thought I was it was a B-.
Okay.
As opposed to a D-, which is where it was.
All right.
My usual stuff is 100% A+.
Yeah.
So that to me was just hell. It was just hell. But Craig invited me into his office and sat me down and showed me the software. And I brought some of the audio files, and he was able to clean them up, and I just walked away feeling so much better.
Good.
Cool synchronicity, huh?
Yeah, really.
So sure enough, he helped me through that, and the lesson I learned from this was I had gotten cocky. I had decided that all I need is my little moleskin tape and my lavalier microphone, and that's all I need to mic anybody on the world for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I should have put my tie clips on these people. You've seen the tie clips.
Yeah.
It would have been completely acceptable and completely clean and clear.
Right.
So just when you think you've kind of got it all figured out, maybe take a step back and say, okay, even the mighty must fall from time to time. We must be prepared. Stay prepared. Hey, don't show up at a gig like I showed up at this video shoot.
Right. You know, we get so cocky sometimes. And it almost always comes back to haunt us. I was telling one of my students just the other day, and we were talking about I think we were talking about the confidence and self-assertion of your particular style of writing music, and I said once you're convinced that you and you alone are right, that's when you're probably wrong.
Right.
Because we get cocky about that. We get cocky about how well what we've always done is going to continue to do.
Yeah.
You know.
But here's the funny thing.
Oh, I don't need another chord. This chord works just fine. You know.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's the mentality maybe we should not adopt so much. Because I was commiserating with my fellow audio guys in Birmingham, most of which are way less experienced than I am.
Yeah.
And they were saying things like, "Well, did you not use your tie clip?" Like, yes, I did not use my tie clip.
No, I didn't use my friggin' tie clip.
I know.
Shut up about the tie clips.
I know I should have used my tie clip. But see, these are guys that have nowhere near my experience in just the simplest little things that I just overlooked because I had it all sorted out, you know?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Enough about me.
Well, we all have those experiences, and those are good lessons to have no matter what you're doing, because you can mistake your rut for experience, I suppose, you know. And yeah, I feel like you get burnt out easily when you do that. You know, this is the stage at which you're getting, you know, quote unquote burnt out because you feel like you can handle anything and do everything. And there's no challenge anymore. And the reality is, well, maybe you're just not accepting those challenges the way you did back when you didn't think you knew anything.
Exactly.
It's kind of a reverse Dunning-Kruger effect or something, you know. So look at how you could always be doing anything better.
Yeah.
You know, look at how much more I was again in a very similar situation, not just recently, because I had composed this thing and it's getting played tomorrow night as of this recording.
Wow.
Yeah. And there were 3 places in the piano player's part that were 100% unplayable.
Oh.
You'd need 3 hands or like a thumb that was like closer to your elbow than in addition to your regular thumb.
Like a dew claw?
Or something. Yeah. I mean, it was this space of like, you know, like 4 and it was, and there was like 3 of these places. And fortunately for me, the pianist is a pretty good friend of mine. So, you know, rather than just not do them or something, he said, "Hey, there's, you know, here are 2 spots. We only found the other one in the actual rehearsal." But he's like, here are 2 spots where that is completely unplayable here. And I said, "Oh, okay. So, you know, let me, you know, go back to my score, fix it, you know, redo it, and then send him the revised score and things." But yeah, I had gotten cocky. I always check for those kinds of things, right? And double check and triple check.
Yes.
But I had just gotten, you know, to, much like you, I just gotten to where it's like, I know how to write for piano, you know,
And how many years up until that point had you been composing?
For piano?
For anything?
20?
20 years. About how long has I been doing location audio?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, well. Hey, Matt.
So there you go. Yes, sir.
I know that you're a little sick and maybe your voice isn't where you want it today, so I'm going to I decided we'll let you read the new review.
Okay. Great.
Go right ahead.
Because we have a new review. Except, no, we don't.
No, we don't. So you just saved your... I just saved your voice.
So just pretend I read a new review.
Yes. My feelings aren't terribly hurt, but I think for a while we were having a new review just about every episode, and I think we finally reached a point of, what do you call it?
Plateaued.
Plateaued.
A point of equilibrium there.
Yeah, so now... For our Patreon patron, we have a new Patreon patron.
Excellent.
I have really been trying to be good about keeping these in sequence of their joining up, you know?
Okay.
Even though, like we said, we are getting a little backlog.
This used to be so easy.
It used to be,
Back when no one emailed us.
I know. Not a bad problem to have, as we say.
Yep. Yes, indeed.
I was going to bring up a gentleman named John Magnuson Monreal.
Okay.
However... He's the next Patreon in line, but he has sent me a listener composition.
Okay.
So we will be talking about him
very soon
in the next episode. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. So, John, stand by. And he sent us some really cool music, lots of it too. So we'll have some cool stuff to go through. But I want to talk to you about another Patreon patron today named Jeremy Faber.
Okay.
Jeremy hails from Independence, Kentucky.
Very nice.
Like we're finding out more and more, he found us on Reddit. More and more people seem to be finding us on Reddit.
I need to do more with Reddit.
One of our listeners recommended that we open up a Reddit page.
We should probably do that.
You would be the man for that, Matt, because you can answer all those theory questions.
Okay, yeah, maybe I should do that. Thank you to that listener who suggested that. We're old. Yeah, help us out with this stuff whenever possible.
I know, the hip kids are telling us how to do it, man, and it's cool. You know, it might have even been Jeremy that made that suggestion, come to think of it. Have to... Either way, so let's hear what Jeremy has to say. He says, I work at a local company where we refurbish Chromebooks, laptops, tablets, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I play piano, guitar, and drums, mostly piano.
Uh-huh.
And I got into music from a young age from video games.
Ah, wow.
My dream is to make music for video games one day. As of now, I participate in game jams. Interesting.
Oh.
Which is where people get together for 48 hours over the weekend and create random video games based on a theme.
Okay.
I'll go to those events and create music on the fly, which is a great practice for just throwing myself out there.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
I've also been working on learning classical music, finally starting with Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major.
Oh, wow. Starting at the top here.
No kidding. Which I've almost got down, he says.
Oh, cool. That's great.
Isn't it? That's a big deal for me, being that before I started listening to you guys, I couldn't even read music, more than single notes at a time. Now I'm learning how to recognize key signatures, chords, and their inversions, all the stuff I wouldn't understand if not for your fantastic podcast.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's always good to hear that we're having a positive impact
Man,
on musical lives out there.
Jeremy says this, but when I saw a video that he sent me, I thought to myself, well, this man knows music.
Yes, absolutely.
This man knows how to play music. We'll talk about that more in just a second. Jeremy has a couple of suggestions. Would you like to read those suggestions?
Yeah, we'll read their suggestions. Let's see. For one, I would like to recommend sightreading.training.com.
Mm-hmm.
This is what that is. It's a website that lets you practice sight reading and hooks up to your MIDI keyboard for you to input the notes that come up on screen. It also lets you set up triads and other configurations. It has one major issue for some reason. Flat key signatures don't seem to work. Technology.
Hey, isn't that a big problem?
Great.
Doesn't that sound like a big problem?
That sounds like that's half of all the keys that you can't use.
But it's not so much about the key, it's about the process.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, you need to learn how to sight read in B flat and E flat and A flat, just like everything else. But,
yes, you do.
But okay. But yeah, that sounds great. It sounds like a great little sight reading tool. I should try that.
Me too.
Actually, because my sight reading stinks.
Oh yeah,
it's bad.
Mine too. We were both garage punks going into a school of music, and I think that we never really got what other people did for sight reading.
Yeah, much like Jeremy, I think we got into the actual sight reading kind of later. We knew we were playing music before we started reading music.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, my sight reading, it used to be better. When I was in college, I could do all right, at least on the bass, my main instrument. Now, yeah.
Practice.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of which, he has another suggestion.
One other suggestion. My other suggestion would be The Practice of Practice by Jonathan Harnum. The book goes into detail about how the brain processes music practice and lots of other details. It's available as an audiobook as well, so I'm sure podcast listeners would like that. Yeah, definitely. And that sounds like right up my alley. I feel like I probably would agree with a lot of what that book says.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because there are a lot of misconceptions out there about practicing. You know, the secret is to practice all night or practice for hours and hours without end, or practice really, really difficult stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes the way the brain learns, you could substitute the word studying for practicing and have the same results.
Yes. Or eating.
Yeah.
No, light snacks throughout the day. 4 or 5 light snacks.
Right, yeah.
Not just one big turkey dinner.
So I would be interested to check that out myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I like that he mentioned the podcast listeners because let's face it, if you're listening to this podcast, you can stand people's voices just
right, yeah,
in your ear for as long as it takes.
Yeah, yeah. If you're a podcast person, then the jump to audiobooks is not a big one.
Yeah. Now, along with these suggestions, Jeremy has asked a question.
He has, I see.
But I think that we can spend about 15 minutes on Patreon answering that question.
I bet we could.
Because Jeremy, by the way, Jeremy, your coffee mug is on the way.
Congratulations.
Jeremy is a perfect fifth, which means he's donated $5 or more a month to us at patreon.com/musicstudent101.
Yes.
And because of that, we will answer one of his questions in a 15-minute or more episode.
Yes, and if you want to also become a perfect fifth listener out there, you will not only get to hear us answer Jeremy's very good question about inversions and dominant sus chords,
but
you will be able to ask a question yourself, and we will do the same for you.
Yes, we will. Hey, Matt, remember how we used to be bad salesmen?
We're getting better, aren't we?
I think we're getting a little bit better.
For the low price.
Hey.
We used to not even want to mention the Patreon
We
page.
didn't.
Because we're
Way
like,
too
we
humble.
don't want to ask for money.
No, we're musicians.
Yeah,
We're not.
now we're so schmoozy about it. We're so much better about it. We're so ridiculous. Apologies in advance for selling out.
I know.
You know.
Happens to the best of us.
It's hard to, it's inevitable.
Okay, one more thing I'll say about Jeremy before we move on to our listener mail. Jeremy, if you want to hear some great music, he is a fantastic pianist.
He is. I saw that video you mentioned, and he's something else.
Jeremy, I showed Matt the Star Wars thing that you did where you were playing the Star Wars theme, and that is some amazing finger work.
It really is. We were very impressed.
If you don't know how to read music and you're doing that, oh my God.
Just wait until he can actually read music, and then he's tackling Chopin's Nocturne in E flat major. So
he is reading.
Yeah.
And it seems to be working. He's also played the Smash Brothers theme, which is pretty amazing, on the same video channel. His YouTube channel is like Joggernut, but it's like JOG3RNUT.
Okay.
At YouTube.
Okay, sweet. Got to check out more of that.
And then he sent me a cool idea for listener compositions. We might not can use this because it's actually based on a thing that's been done before.
Yeah.
And it's not really his original composition, but it's a cool take.
Okay.
So dig this, man. He sent me this thing called Piano Man's Nemesis. Okay, and it's a play on the Piano Man and minor. Hi, Billy Joel.
Right,
Sing us
yeah.
a song, you're the Piano Man.
Yeah.
It's a play on that in minor, and the actual lyrics are the lyrics of H.P. Lovecraft's Nemesis.
Aha.
In the style of Dream Theater.
In this style of Dream Theater.
That's his little twist on it. They did it in the style of Dream Theater.
And it is Dream Theater-licious. He really captures that. As a Dream Theater fan,
yeah.
That was accurate. That was pretty good.
Matt signs off on that, man. And the vocalist was quite fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we'll actually get to hear that, a snippet of that on one of the coming episodes.
Yeah,
because
let's hope so.
Jeremy is also working on compositions, and I think we might not have him on this coming episode of Listener Compositions, but we will certainly address him.
Cannot wait.
Sooner than later on that. Thank you, Jeremy.
Cannot wait.
Now, moving on to listener mail,
Uh-huh.
I was actually going to bring up a listener named Nancy Mitchell.
Okay.
But Nancy Mitchell has sent me an original composition.
Ooh.
So even though it's a little bit out of sequence, we're going to save her for the next episode as well.
Yeah, because the next episode, yeah. Good plan.
Man, we have so many listeners writing in, composing music.
That's just wonderful, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So much great music being created out there. It does my heart good.
But for this episode, we will now talk about our good friend Mariah Schillern.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Mariah is Dutch, but living in Overton, Hampshire, England.
Mm-hmm.
And she, what she calls a small village with a huge musical community.
How cool is that?
Yeah, there are a lot of those. Actually.
Birmingham kind of is.
Birmingham kind of is, yeah. Sometimes being a smaller community actually lends itself to musicality somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's less feeling that you've got to claw your way to the top or something.
Possibly.
You're sort of just all friends and colleagues. Anyway, Mariah says, "Hello, chaps. I'm writing from the UK, and I've listened to your show since the summer of 2017. Thank you so much."
Which is basically from the get-go.
Basically from the get-go, yeah. I received a good grounding in music theory and had singing and guitar lessons at boarding school a long time ago. But I quit playing guitar and instead began singing in choirs as an alto. Your episode 22 for voice leading and counterpoint were real eye-openers for me. I work in Reading, South England, and was introduced to the ukulele at a folk festival in 2015. Love the uke. Gotta love the uke. I've never looked back. Learning to play this user-friendly little instrument has enriched my life and allowed me to meet new friends. Finding out the nuts and bolts of music theory from you guys has been an added bonus. Each episode is paced to perfection, and the banter and tips and tricks you share with us are superb.
Ooh.
High praise.
Hey.
After seeing the Ukulele Orchestra of Great Britain, okay, can we just pause a moment and say that there is a Ukulele Orchestra of Great Britain?
Yes,
that
there
is
is.
a thing.
And we actually checked out a little bit of it, didn't we?
Yes, we did. And that is something else. Wow. Just wow. That is so awesome.
Yeah.
I became intrigued with the little bass ukulele that was played by their rather dishy bass player. Dishy. We'll have to get her to translate the British slang. But
keep on reading and I'll Google dishy.
Okay. By their rather dishy bass player, Jaunty Banks, and soon I owned my own Countryman bass ukulele. A year later, I had the opportunity to meet the founder of the Reading Ukulele Group, who was gracious enough to teach me the bass lines of the songs covered by the group. John Caudry is an enthusiastic and generous bandleader who I can also credit as having introduced me to your show. Also,
Hey, John, thanks.
yeah. With his patience and guidance and your unmissable podcast, I am listening to music in a whole new way. The 2-hour commute I do each day now is more informative and fun. P.S. I would love to rate your show on my podcast player, but unfortunately the app I use does not have that functionality. Technology.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how else I can leave a rating without having to use the player from that big fruit orchard company. Yeah, maybe not worry about that.
Sadly, it does seem to be one of the only ones that allow for ratings, which might explain why we haven't been getting as many ratings, because more people are listening on Spotify.
Yeah.
And things like that, YouTube.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. They're kind of not the cool kids in the podcasting world.
Nah, doesn't seem
anymore.
like it, does it?
Yeah, so much to unpack there. That was a great mail. Thank you so much, Mariah.
So
Really loving all of that. First of all, the shout out to the episodes on Counterpoint, which is just because we were so afraid nobody was going to care.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, oh, nobody even. Why is this even? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And it was so great to hear that somebody likes that. Thanks for so many kind words about what we're doing. We're really happy to be helping you in your journey.
The reason I kind of laughed in the middle of you reading her letter was because I was also looking up the word dishy. So
explain it to us poor uncultured Americans.
This rather dishy bass player, John T. Banks, it is an adjective for sexually attractive. Or scandalous or gossipy.
Well, it might have been the other one.
It could have been one or the other. Two completely different things, really. Dishy.
Yeah, I consider myself moderately up on my British terminology for an American, but clearly, it's only for an American. There's still some things I have not heard before. But yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's great. Learned a new word.
Well, thanks again, Mariah. Mariah also sent us a link of her ukulele group playing Jump in the Line.
Yeah.
Harry Belafonte.
And it's great.
Yeah. From Beetlejuice.
Yeah. It is great. Definitely check that out.
Jump in the line. Rock your body in time. Okay, I believe you.
That's probably enough.
Yeah. I'm going to jump out of that line.
Before we get sued.
Okay. Oh, right. I thought you were talking about my singing. I feel better now.
That too.
Okay. Oh. All right. Let's move on, shall we?
Let's move on. Let's actually talk about some music theory. I feel like we haven't actually talked about any music theory in a while.
It's been a minute, and here's the thing, Matt. Episode 50 was the last time we brought this up.
Right.
And we made a bit of a mistake in waiting so many episodes to bring up part 2, because in my mind I thought we had covered all this.
Yeah, and in my mind I kind of had to. Somehow we forgot that we left some stuff out.
I went back and realized we had a whole other half of that chapter to get into, so we're going to get into that today. I found that Roy Francoli's Harmony and Context had a bit more of an in-depth discussion than the other text I've been reading.
And honestly, it's a big subject. It's a challenging subject in colleges when students learn music theory, and it's a big deal. It's one of those complex kind of things. They usually take a while to sort of get used to the way it works. And that is modulation, since we haven't mentioned yet. Modulation, specifically in this case, modulation to closely related keys.
Right.
Which, if I remember correctly, were keys that we defined as 2 accidentals or less.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, in the key of C, major closely related key would be G or F, or perhaps D or B flat, and then that's kind of getting further afield, or something that is a parallel major or minor, or relative major or minor.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about that. So, if you got C major, for example, you got of course one you have the relative minor, which is A minor. So
right.
C major and A minor. That's
which
two.
Share a key signature. So 0 accidental difference is pretty close.
It doesn't get much more closely related than that, does
Right.
it? And then if you add 1 sharp or 1 accidental, you have that key.
1 sharp or 1 accidental.
And if you add 1 sharp to the key signature, you have that key plus its relative minor.
Right. Yeah.
And then if you add 1 flat to that key, you have that plus its relative minor.
Right. Yeah.
So really 5 really closely related keys.
Yeah. Yeah. And then some people will go out to 2 with the same thing, but you get the idea. Keys that are not super far away from the key you started on the circle of fifths.
Yeah.
Is the idea.
Another thing we should probably just go ahead and recap before we get into this episode is the distinction between a modulation and a tonicization, which there seems to be a little bit of gray area.
There is, and terminology is different depending on what theorist you're reading or discussing. In my mind, a tonicization essentially happens when the new key is just there. Either you begin a new phrase that's totally in another key, or you have a secondary dominant, like a 5 of 2 or something, and you go to 2, and then you're just in the key of 2. What some theorists might call a direct modulation. Or you just do, what has been commonly referred to as like a gear shift, where you just take everything and hit it step up, where a new key just kind of blooms out of nowhere. And that's a distinction from, just going 5 of 2 to 2, and then going on to 5 and being in the original key still, and that's just a secondary dominant chord. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
That's what I've said before, right?
A temporary tonicization.
Yeah, temporary tonicization. Yeah. So that's tonicization in the short term. Modulation is when a key moves to another key, shifts into another key via a chord that is common to both of those keys, or a tone that is common to both of those keys.
Right.
So, in that regard, pivot chord modulations is a modulation in which there is some chord, and it is usually a chord of predominant function. So it is not necessarily strongly pulling us in the key that we are in the way a 5 chord would.
Right.
It is usually a chord of predominant function that kind of could go somewhere, but that is a chord that could serve predominant function both in the original key and in a different key to which you're going to go. So, for example, a chord that is a 6th chord in the key of G major, becoming a 2 chord in the key of D major. And we have modulated to a closely related key, one that is an accidental away, and there you go.
Can you show us that real quick?
Yeah, let's see. So if we're in G major.
And you establish yourself?
Yeah, and then and then we're playing around, and we're playing in G major, and we're playing chords, and not big things, but then we have a 6, and instead of going 6, 2, 5, 1, and G, we treat that 6 as a 2 in D major, and then just go to and now we're in D.
Pretty smooth.
So one more time without all the talking and messing around. So we're in G. 6. And now I'm in D.
Yeah.
And that's a modulation to the dominant, right? It's modulation to the 5. So smooth
Yeah.
that if you're not paying really close attention, you will miss it.
You will miss it.
I myself miss modulations to the dominant all the time when I'm just listening to music.
Uh-huh.
Whereas, something further away, I'll catch it. It'll sound like a different key. That is so smooth, you will often miss it.
Yeah.
But modulations to the dominant has very important connotations in classical music and sonata form and things like that.
And because there's not a whole lot of chromaticism other than maybe just that one extra leading tone, that new leading tone.
Yeah, which is not a lot, right?
It seems like the diatonic feel is still kind of occurring.
Yeah, and it almost depends on what you do after that, whether you modulated to the dominant or whether that was just a 5 of 5 to 5. You kind of have to gonna have to establish at that point that you're in 5 to. To establish that you actually did hit D,
So yeah, once you landed in D, that F sharp and C sharp stayed there.
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, that C sharp stayed there.
Yeah.
F sharp was already there.
Yeah. So that, in a nutshell, is the modulation to 5. It's the pivot chord.
Mm-hmm.
There are pivot chords that will get you to other closely related keys. I'm reinterpreting a 6 as a 2, or a 6 as a 4, or a 2 is a 4, or things like that. We'll propel you into other keys, and that is a pivot chord modulation.
Very smooth.
Yes. And we discussed, just in brief, 3 quick steps to create a smooth and effective modulation.
Yeah.
First is, and I kind of just did those.
Yeah.
Establish the first key using a 5 or 1 cadence or 2. Ideally an authentic cadence, because that's what establishes the key best.
Yes.
In the course of actual music, hopefully you've established your key pretty strongly anyway, if it's good tonal music. And, the classical masters, of course, did that. But hopefully in the course of actual music, you've done that. But establish your key via 5 to 1 cadence.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Is a key not established unless there's some kind of 5 to 1 cadence in it? Or
That's pretty much the way, at least in classical music, we consider a key to have been established.
Okay.
Is via an authentic cadence.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes you can say, well, 7 to 1 establish a key. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's just 5 to 1 without scale degree 5 in it.
Yeah.
But generally, an authentic 5/7 to 1 or 5 to 1 cadence is how you strongly establish a key. Now, again, in actual music, you're playing in that key. It kind of becomes self-evident. But yeah. Once you've done that, use a diatonic pivot chord, and by diatonic we mean it's a chord that's found diatonically in both of those keys, right? So for my example in G major, the 6 was E minor, which was also the minor 2 in D major, and that's how I got there.
Yeah.
Right? To use a chord that's diatonic to the first and the second key, and then establish the second key the same way you did the first key, which is again, what I did.
Once you're in D, you included the A major
do
chord.
some 5/7 to 1 sort of cadences to establish that you're in D.
And perhaps we should clarify that these are 3 steps to actually an effective pivot chord modulation.
An effective pivot chord modulation.
Because there's other modulations we're going to talk about, right?
Yes, there are.
Now, for any more recapitulation, I would suggest go ahead and listen to episode 50 one more time.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good couple of listens episode, just in general, I think. That's a good one to listen to a couple of times.
You get to hear me and Matt drink beer.
Did we drink beer on that one?
That was our 50th anniversary. At 50th episode, that was a big deal.
Oh, yeah. Now I remember that. Yeah, we did drink some beer.
It was just one beer. We didn't get all
It was just one beer.
sloppy.
Yeah. Calm down.
But yeah, but at this point, let us go ahead and move on to the second part of this discussion.
Right. So we begin the second part of this discussion with modulation to the relative major and minor keys.
Right, which we talked about.
Which we talked about, and just as a refresher, it is the minor key that shares a key signature with some major key.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, G major and E minor,
Uh-huh.
or C major and A minor.
Yes.
Yeah, A flat major and F minor. I could go on and on.
And is it fair to say vice versa?
And vice versa. Yeah. So the relative major then is the major key that shares that. So the relative major of F sharp minor is A major,
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth. Yeah, and we did an episode about that, back episode, one of the lower ones.
Mm-hmm.
10 or 20 or so, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But when modulating to relative major and minor keys, unlike major keys, 1 to 5 is actually not the most common of modulations when you're playing in minor keys. So when you're playing in major keys, at least in the classical music world, modulations to the dominant are so common that you almost don't even pay them that much attention. Unless you're I mean, you kind of have to if you're going to analyze. But they're so common is that they don't ever stand out as anything weird.
Your ears
Right.
might not perk up in a way that they would otherwise to a
They almost
person.
certainly don't, yeah, especially our ears.
Right.
And that's because they're very, very, very common. When you're in a minor key, you still see a modulation of the dominant. That still does happen, but far more common is actually the modulation to the relative major. I have heard theory professors profess that you can't even really call that a modulation because the key signature doesn't even change.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they would call it more of like a modal shift.
A color shift.
Yeah, almost like a tonal shift, a color shift, modal, more than an actual modulation. I mean, for my money, I don't like to get bogged down in semantics. Call it a modulation and it's fine. The important thing is that it is very, very common in a minor key. That is true. So the relative major shares all the same notes with its relative minor. It's got, and this is why it's so common. You don't really have to add more notes, and that makes it a really, really good and easy key to get to. And you hear this happening all the time.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. What are some good pivot chords between a minor key and its relative major? For example, 1 going to 3. Let's go from minor 1 to major 3.
Yeah, well, almost anything other than the chords of dominant function, almost. Yeah, so we can be in, like, for example, E minor.
Uh-huh.
And we can be playing around in E minor. What are good chord progressions in E minor? I don't even know what I'm doing, and it doesn't even matter. So we're in E minor. And we can just sort of treat that 1 as 6.
Mm-hmm.
And go 1, but now that 1 is 6, so we're going to go 6 to 5 of 5. What key am I going to? Okay, yeah. So we can go so now it's 6. We're going to go 6, and then just be all 5 of 5 to 5.
Ooh.
And then we're in G.
G major.
It happens that easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Some other good pivot chords, treating the diminished 2 chord as a diminished 7 chord. So here I am in E major.
1 5 1.
And I'll do a 4 chord just to be. And then a 2 chord. And then just that 2 chord is 7. And we're in G.
And of course, this funny little 7 chord can actually be the 7 of a few other things, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a diminished chord.
Oh, yeah. It can be the 7 of any kind of anything you want.
So you can just kind of jump off wherever you want to, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll probably talk about the fully diminished 7 chord in a later theory podcast.
Fair enough.
But I can't wait about that. Yeah, it gets its own podcast. Absolutely.
We ought to have actually already done that. I can't remember.
Did we do the thing where you can go to anything that's a half step up?
We did.
Okay.
We did, yeah.
Well, then, there you go.
Go back and listen to that. Maybe we should too.
Oh boy. All right. So yeah, there is that. And then there is the 3 treated as 1.
Mm-hmm.
You know, kind of same thing. You can sort of just decide that 3 is 1 now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we decided 1 is 6 now.
Mm-hmm.
4 reinterpreted as 2. Always a good one.
Yeah. Although it would have to be a minor 4, wouldn't it? Because
yeah, well, we're going from a minor to a major key.
Yeah.
So it's diatonically minor in the minor key, and diatonically the 2 is diatonically minor in the major.
got it.
All the same notes, remember?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we can go to 4, and then that just becomes 2, which goes
5 and 1, the new
and
key.
then
Established.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. So yeah, there's that, and then 6 reinterpreted as 4. Same deal. So 1 and E minor, and then we'll go to a nice big 6.
I love that.
To 5, or 6 to 2 rather would probably be better, right? 6 to 2. To 5. 1.
So now we're in G, right?
And now we're in G.
Okay. G being the 3rd of E minor.
G being the 3rd of E minor, the relative major of
The
E
relative
minor.
major, yes. The
Yeah.
3 chord and the relative major.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very good.
So pretty easy stuff, right?
It is, and I think that's a pretty good discussion on modulation to the relative major and minor keys, don't you?
Yes, and even better news is that if you want to go the other way, if you want to go from the major to the relative minor, all of those pivot chords continue to work. Yeah, you're just going the other way.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, just switch them around.
I love to hear stuff like that. Mental shortcuts.
Again, this is really, really easy. This is why it happens so much. And most minor key music in the classical world at some point modulates to the relative major. Go listen to a minor key Bach anything, you know, and that's what you have.
That's like the minor version of the 1 to 5 in major.
Yeah,
It happens that common.
right.
Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah. You know, and 1 to 5 happens in minor keys too. It just doesn't happen as much. You have to get to like Beethoven and people who are deliberately flouting convention a little to.
And am I understanding correctly that when you do modulate from 1 to 5 in minor, it is typically to the minor 5?
Yes, typically to the minor 5 because that's what would be diatonic.
Yeah.
Now again, composers don't like to be told what to do.
No.
You will see versions of the major 5. Mozart was kind of famous for that. But that is something that an analyst will remark upon because it's unusual. It's like, look, he modulated to the major 5 here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good discussion on the relative major, modulation to the relative major and relative minor keys.
Right, yeah.
I think. Now, in the previous, or I guess the part 1 of this episode, episode
Right.
50, we did talk about writing, we defined pivot chord modulations.
Yes.
Let's talk about 3 easy steps to writing pivot chord modulations.
Okay. Well, as we've said,
Yeah.
very easy.
Recapping the recap.
Recapping the recap. All right, so step 1, be in a key.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I'm going to play a little progression in G major here so that we know we're in G major. Let's see. And now I'm going to go somewhere else. Where should I go, Jeremy?
Well, since we're in a major key, I figure a good place to go might just be the 5 of this key, which is D major.
All right, so I'm in G major. I'm going to pick a good pivot chord. Let's go ahead.
That is diatonic to both.
That is diatonic to that is a chord in both keys that doesn't need anything outside of the key.
Okay. In the key of G major,
Mm-hmm.
let's say that we want to go to D major.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the A minor is 2 in G major,
Mm-hmm.
but in the key of... No. Help me out, man. I'm sucking right now.
Yeah, I think we can go to... I think we could probably go to 6.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so the relative
which
minor.
is right, which is 2 in D major, right?
Yeah.
And then just and then
Okay.
and now we're in D major.
Okay, so that pivot chord was the
Yeah.
was the 2.
So little and so I ended, and then I established step 3, establish your new key with a chord progression.
It sounded really beautiful, but can you talk us through that? Can you remember what you just did? Talk us through it?
Okay, all right, here we go.
It's good music.
Establishing a key.
And we decided we're in G major.
We're in G.
1 sharp. There we are. Is that 1? Okay.
6, which is also 2,
Yeah.
in D major.
Uh-huh.
Going to 5, and now 1 is D major,
Yeah.
and then establish the new one.
And that last half was just spent establishing yourself in D major,
Yeah,
right?
right, yeah.
And so the moment...
The similar chord progression, but in D major.
So if we're looking at this on paper, the moment we would notice the modulation would be where that C sharp pops in.
Yeah, probably.
From the 5 of D, which is A major, which is not in the key of G.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, if we're just listening, this is what's so sneaky about pivot chord modulations, also known as common chord modulations, by the way, is that you don't realize that pivot chord. You don't realize that you've modulated until after that pivot chord has happened.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then it's like, oh wow, new key.
So then
unless it's 1 to 5, and then you probably don't even notice. You know, it just fly right by you.
All right, so you might have to do some backtracking to find out where that pivot chord is.
Yeah.
Typically, maybe the chord right before that little chromatic moment.
Typically, yes. In fact, a lot of professors will tell you to look for the chord of predominant function that immediately precedes the 5 to 1 of the new key. That is your pivot chord.
Very good.
So those are pivot chord modulations. Also known as common chord modulations, because there's a chord common to 2 keys. And in that version, we are using a diatonic chord, a chord diatonic to both keys to sort of shift our focus. We can also modulate by other means. For example, we can move chromatically from a leading tone to a new key. What I mean by that is that the quote-unquote pivot chord, although we don't necessarily call it that anymore, but the quote-unquote pivot chord will be a 5 of 5 or a 7 of something, a 7 of 2 or so, and we will go to that key. And in going to that key, we will go to that chord, but then that chord will become the 1 of the new key. Okay. And then we'll be in the key of that new chord, if that makes sense.
So let me make sure I understand correctly. The chord that we would normally call the pivot chord in pivot chord modulations.
Yeah.
Is more of an agent, a vehicle.
Yeah. This is what we consider to be a chromatic modulation.
Chromatic modulation.
Yes. So I'm going to be in a new key. I'm going to be in D. So I'm in D, and I'm going to go to a secondary 7th chord, right? I'm going to go to a 7 of 2. And then I'm going to move that into 2, and I'm going to make it E major. Yeah, see how fun that was? And then from E major, I can... be in E major. D major. And notice I even changed the mode there too, just to mess with you a little bit.
That
from
was
minor to major.
I was gonna say, question, Master Fuchs. Why did we end up? That's probably more voice.
Good counterpoint joke.
Yeah, right. Listen to our counterpoint episodes. Master Fuchs, why are we in the 2 of D major, but it is all of a sudden an E major?
Well, we've modulated.
But Master Fuchs, if you modulate to the 2 of D major, isn't that an E minor?
Yes, but in a modulation, we have left the key of D major behind.
Ah.
We have now used that 7 of 2 in D major to become 7 of 1 in E, and it can be 7 of 1 in E major or minor.
And
Don't care.
E is really still considered a relatively closely related to D major because
it's only 2 accidentals away. So yeah, this is all closely related stuff.
This is interesting. Okay, so the leading tone chord lands on E. We're forgetting D major altogether, so it can be an E major or E minor. That's what's going on?
Yeah. You don't have to remain in that mode once you've gotten there, especially with these chromatic modulations. You know, when you're doing the pivot chord modulations, they have to be diatonic to both keys, right? But there's nothing that says that the new key has to be diatonic to the old key. So that would be boring.
Yeah. So I'm finding myself less and less constrained as we learn more and more.
That often happens in theory.
Yeah.
That often happens in theory. The more you know, the less constrained you feel because you feel like you have more options.
Ooh, well, let's keep on learning then, shall we?
Let's keep on then. So let's see. So I did a basic example there, moving from 1 to 2. You could move from 1 to, let's see. You could move from like, I'm going to do another one. This time, let's start off in an E minor key. Let's be in C minor.
Ooh.
And this time I'm going to do, I'm in dark and depressing C minor.
5, 1.
And then I'm going to move to, let's just say a 5 of 3, just for kicks. 5, 6 of 3 even, just for kicks. And then that's going to be 3, but then I'm going to be in the key of my 3, my E flat. See how ridiculously easy it is to get to the relative major.
Ridiculously easy. Now we're established.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And actually, I really like that progression. I'm going to write that down.
Let's see if I can do it again.
C minor, so it's minor 1.
5, 1, and then 5, 6 of 3. Passing scale degree 4, and now we're in 3, which is E flat major.
Yeah. And we establish it with that 5-1 at the end.
Yeah, and don't give short shrift to the establishment. That's what completes your modulation. You know, if you just go 5, 6, 5, 3 to 3 and say, all right, there you are. Well, that was just a chord progression, right? You could go from that 3 and still be in C minor. Go 3, 6, 2, 5. You know, it is the establishment afterwards that kind of makes it a modulation.
And
you know,
quick ear check for me. You ended that on an imperfect authentic cadence because I thought I heard a third in the
yeah, I did indeed.
But it can be imperfect or authentic.
You're right, yeah. As long imperfect or perfect authentic cadence, yeah.
Nice.
Or I mean that once you've modulated, you know, you just kind of go on and you're playing music, right?
Yeah.
You're just in a new key now.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
We can also use this to get into those keys that are so easy to get into using pivot chord modulations. You see how ridiculously easy it is to go from a minor 1 to the major 3, as I just did. Yeah. You can also use 7 of 5 to get into 5. You know, that you can use these too. They work just as well.
Okay.
And are often more common in some of the more 19th century music and things, where more chromaticism is generally called for and generally part of the style. You know, another cool thing you can do is use what we call a melodic sequence. Now, you may remember this is sort of just taking the same sort of pitch combination and just moving that same pitch combination up and down in a scale. Like just a real quick, good example. Right, you know? And these are often easily harmonized with the circle of fifths.
It's like a 1. Kind of 5-y.
Yeah, and 6.
6-y.
And then let's go 5. And these make really good modulatory examples too. You can sort of get off that melodic sequence wherever you want. So and I'm going to get off right there, and I'm going to call that a pivot chord, and go to A. And be in D major.
Now my ears did perk up just then, but it might be because you said something.
Because I want. Well, you'll get more sensitive to it as you listen to it, 2 modulations to 5 and 4 modulations to 5. You will get more sensitive to the fact that they happened.
All right. So, in theory, you could just ride this sequence and then get off wherever you want to.
Yes.
And kind of land wherever you want to.
And call that 5 or call that 2 or call that whatever.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And is there any reason that a descending sequence lends itself more to this as opposed to an ascending sequence? Because some theorists seem to make that distinction.
Descending melodic sequences are, number 1, far more common. And number 2, are more easily harmonized with the circle of fifths. And have the distinction of sort of suspending tonality more so than ascending sequences. Ascending sequences are tough and uncommon.
It's almost like an ascending sequence almost tells a different story in my mind.
Yeah.
It's like it's part of the...
It'd be hard to stay out of D.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I could try, I suppose, but, you know.
Cool.
Yeah, so there's that. So in writing chromatic modulations, we do very much the same thing, right? We are going to establish for ourselves a key. D major.
D major.
Let's not be boring. I'm just playing around now. Free composition lesson, people.
Okay. Dr. Matthew Scott Phillips' original.
Establish your key. Write a movement using the bass as a leading tone. So, I'm just going to go up that 1 chromatic note and be all. And then, if you don't use the bass, use a 5/5 to move to the new key. Okay. But this is a 7 that I've created.
Yeah.
Which I guess I could make 5 somehow.
Sure.
Yeah. 5/5. And move from there to E major. Or E minor.
Established.
Okay, sorry.
Established.
Is established.
Well, We just did all the steps, but just to recap real quick, what did you do exactly? You established the key, obviously.
I established a key.
In the first thing.
Yeah. I wrote a bass line that involved a chromatic note, a note outside of that scale.
And why did you do this in the bass instead of some other voice?
You could do it in another voice. It makes the most sense in the bass.
And it's probably more obvious in the bass?
It can be a little more obvious in the bass, okay. Yeah. If you're going to make a 7/8 or something, the bass is almost going to have to create some chromaticism.
Okay.
Yeah. You can, like we said, also sort of use not just 7, but 5/8, and that could be 5/6/5 or whatever, But then you move to that, and then you establish the new key.
Very good.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like we kind of touched on this a bit earlier, but we're moving on at this point to modulation and phrase structure.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to get a little more cloudy, a little more gray, a little more foggy, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
That was a cool little Dr. Seuss kind of rhyme. But sequential modulation, let's talk a little bit about that.
Right.
Because when we did the circle of fifths thing,
that was sort of a sequential modulation. Yeah,
okay.
Like I said, sequential modulations can be used to change the tonal center, and those changes will occur at a phrase level. For example, there's a really famous Mendelssohn piece called Fingal's Caves. And from the first two measures to the second two measures can be thought of as a sort of sequential modulation. So it's... Trying again.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. And then measures 2 are. And then it goes on like that.
Same rhythmic.
Yeah. But those first, that melodic sequence, that collection of, right, which is just sort of an embellishment of the tonic chord. Mm-hmm. It is modulated up at a phrase structure, mm-hmm. and again an ascending sequence for you. Mm-hmm. Even Yeah. Mendelssohn's a genius.
Nice,
but you kind of create this feeling, like. And then it goes on from there, and does other stuff, and I don't remember the whole piece, but yeah.
Rather than that one moment in time, such as the pivot chord or such as an abrupt, which we'll talk about in a second. But this is actually more. It happens within a phrase, on a phrase level, like you were saying.
Yeah, it's something that's going on at a phrase level. Yeah, that's probably the best way to describe it. Is a modulation at a phrase level. And sometimes you can sort of make sort of these comparative analysis. Well, it's like, the key of this phrase is the pivot chord to the next phrase or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of an up level from just chord to phrases being in particular keys.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let's talk about this is what we got into this a bit earlier, and we're trying to figure out the right way to describe, to explain this, right?
Right.
Because we're going to move on to phrase modulation, which is actually what we just talked about. Is it
Kinda, yeah. We talked about Fingal's Caves in the context of a sequential modulation, because that was an ascending melodic sequence.
Mm-hmm.
There is also just the idea of phrase modulation in general, which happens without a pivot chord.
Yeah. Okay.
This is also known as a direct modulation.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will even call it an abrupt modulation.
Right.
Because it is abrupt.
Yeah.
Think of what has come to be known as gear shifts.
Yeah.
In popular music, where they just jump everything up a key.
Yeah.
Like in Living on a Prayer right at the end.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's the one that came and popped out in my head, man.
Oh yeah, totally what I would call an abrupt modulation, which also might be called a direct modulation or phrase modulation. And it is just the plain, basic, simple idea of I'm going to be in a key. I'm going to be in G minor. And then I'm going to be in F major. and then I'm going to be back. Yeah.
No reason, no pivot
Yeah.
chord, nothing to tie the two together.
Yeah. Now that's a very simple example, which could just say, well, you just move to a chord in G major, right? So it's to do. Oh man, this is really stretching my compositional chops now. It's good for me.
It's not going to get any easier, Matt.
But I'm going to be in G minor and establish. And then I'm going to go from there just to C minor. And then establish. And then from there to just a D major. And then, and then I'm back. Yeah. So this kind of phrase level, motion that will in actual practice very often sort of make sense as a chord progression, but just every chord expanded to a key, like a key progression.
Yeah.
Which is a little mind-blowing when you think about it, and really, really hard to do on the spot, ladies and gentlemen, just in case you were wondering. But there you go.
But the abrupt modulation, you can just do whenever, however you want to.
Kind of whenever, however you want. Yeah, it's sort of a catch-all.
Now, let's go back to Bon Jovi for a second here. Because I remember this album came out Slippery When Wet, and it had You Give Love a Bad Name.
Yeah.
And then Living on a Prayer was a really big hit from that album.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid.
It's still a big hit to this day.
As a kid, I was bothered by this moment in the song, okay? Towards the very last part of the song, you live for the fight when that's all that you got. They go up.
They go up a whole step.
Something funny happens, and I didn't know what it was as a kid, but now I realize that is what is known as the gear shift.
Yeah. AKA the abrupt modulation.
Now, dig this, man, because I checked this out again, right? And actually I have it on Rocksmith, so I learned how to play it on Rocksmith, so I can be sure I know what I'm talking about. They actually, not only, and this is another reason this bothered me as a kid, not only do they gear shift up, normally people gear shift up to like maybe a whole step.
Yeah.
These guys went up a minor third.
Did they really? I was just assumed it was up a whole step. That's a minor third?
That's what I thought too.
Holy crap, man.
So they went from E minor to G minor, if you're in that key. That's the key that was on whatever. And not only that, but they dropped a beat, okay? So this last measure right before the key change is actually 7, a measure of 7.
Oh, wow. That was probably an accident on their part.
Hey, I was gonna say, just some punks from Jersey? Maybe not.
And this is a digression, so it may or may not make it past the edit phase. All right, so is that just an accident on their part, or are these punks from Jersey actually kind of musical geniuses? Does it matter?
It doesn't.
In the end, the point of music theory and the goal of a music theorist is to make observations that tell us why the music affects us the way it does.
We can't say that enough, can we?
We really can't.
Yeah.
And the idea is to say, well, this has this effect for this reason. In this particular case, this has this very dramatic effect at the end of this Bon Jovi song because, for one thing, it's abrupt modulation up a minor third, which, I think they were in a major key, so that might not have been diatonic, right? To a distantly related key, which we'll have to talk about on another podcast.
Yeah.
In addition, they lost a beat.
Yeah.
Now, did they sit down and say, I know what we'll do. We'll do an abrupt modulation up a minor third and drop a beat? Maybe, maybe not. The point is, that's
did he just say, "Oh, this is how this sounds. Let's do this."
Yeah, or let's just do this. Or let's just pick it up to show off that I can sing that high, or whatever. Or maybe it just for whatever reason that's what happened, and this is how we feel about it. This is how it made us feel. And people love singing that part.
Yeah.
People love jumping in and singing at that part. They love singing that song in general.
It comes alive. It really does. And now that I'm not a kid anymore, I actually really like that part of the song.
Yeah. So genius, are they secret musical geniuses?
Often you don't really even know until you do some digging. But in the case of Bon Jovi, the keyboard player David Bryan actually attended Juilliard.
So maybe.
But he quit to join John Bon Jovi.
Well,
So
he still got into Juilliard,
he
which
may or
is
may-
say something.
yeah, he may or may not have had a part in that point in
Yeah.
the music. But
Right. You know, and that raises the question, well, to be a genius, do you have to be self-aware of what you're doing, you know, or not? And I think my point is, for music theorists, we should be excited to understand why that piece of music sounds the way it does.
yeah,
You know, and not be too caught up into, did they intend to do that?
Yeah. Check out the whole song, but definitely in the last minute of the song,
Yeah,
the last chorus is actually modulated up. So,
definitely. Yeah. And that's a huge digression, but
but that is an abrupt modulation.
it is an abrupt modulation. I would definitely call it that.
Oh, John Bon Jovi, if you're listening, same deal.
Props, man.
Props. Send us some dune buggies.
Send us some dune buggies.
And I just want to have coffee with you.
I'll take a copy of Slippery When Wet because mine got scratched up decades ago.
If you'll sign it.
and a cup of coffee, and that'll be awesome.
We'll give you a cup of coffee and a Music Student 101 coffee mug. John Bon Jovi. Moving on.
We cannot really... Okay, so we talk about modulations, and we talk about them in the abstract. Mm-hmm. And we talk about them sort of out of context. And
Really?
we talk about them in this idea of just kind of moving along, flowing from chord to chord, and look, now all of a sudden we're in sort of this different key. Mm-hmm. The truth is, at least the truth when you're in terms of classical music, and in my strong suspicion is that this is also true in most music, is that the truth about modulations is that they have the most relevance to the form of your music, to the structure of your music. You don't just modulate out of nowhere because you can. You modulate in places that are important. Mm. And these modulations create sort of the structural framework around which your music moves. For example, you might modulate going into the chorus, and the chorus is in a new key, right? Or you may modulate when you go back to the head of a jazz tune or something, or modulate for the solos.
Interesting.
Yeah, or you may modulate to do the guitar solo. Dream Theater actually does that a good bit. In classical music, modulations have a structural framework. So when you're, for example, in an ABA form, the A will modulate to the dominant, the B will be in the dominant, and then when A comes back, it will not modulate to the dominant. Mm-hmm. It will stay in the tonic, and there you have your ABA prime form, which is just a thing, a digression, a home key, a digression, and then a return to that key. Mm-hmm. Right. And this is what really happens. And so we have to talk about phrases that modulate. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about the musical period before in some of our previous podcasts on form.
Form and analysis.
Yes, indeed. And modulating periods are just that. They are periods that end in a key different from the ones they begin. And they're very, very common. Question. Yes.
Are we building on the concept of modulating sequences?
We can be. We don't necessarily have to be. We sequences and periods are kind of don't always go super well together, but sometimes they do. So
sequences are part of a period, right?
Yeah, sequences can be part of the period, and for that reason, we can talk about them in terms of sequences, but we don't have to. We could just talk about a period, which is two phrases, right?
Yes.
One in which, and in phrase one, we're going to end on a cadence that is not as strong as the cadence we end phrase two on. Mm-hmm. So we get this kind of linked together thing. So a really common thing, I can be in D major. And I'm just going to write a pretty little couple of phrases, pretty little period. Half cadence, right? And then my second ends on a perfect authentic cadence, but in a different key, but in the dominant key.
Yeah.
Right? And then in much stuff, this will get repeated. And now I'm in A. And then, I could potentially go on to a B section. There's and then move back to somehow. That was cruddy, but and what I'm doing here is modulating periods. The phrase 1 ended in a half cadence on D. Phrase 2 modulated to the dominant. And then we did other stuff. And that last period, the modulation doesn't happen. So we just stay in D.
Okay.
Kind of rewritten.
Interesting.
Yeah. And like I said, this often. Oh man, I already said that, but before I even looked at it.
Then it goes to 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first phrase sort of establishes the key, and the second phrase modulates, and that's a period. Most typically modulates to the 5 in major, or to the relative major in a minor key, or to the 3 in minor, right? But it will also go to. Major 3 on occasion in a major key. It will go to the minor 5 in a minor key. There's a really great Schubert. There's a really great Schubert example in a piece called Moment Musicaux, in which he modulates from A flat to D flat. So he modulates to the 4, and then and then repeats the phrase and is in the 4, and then that 4 is reinterpreted, that D flat is reinterpreted as C sharp, the 5 of F sharp minor, and then he goes on into the B section, which is F sharp in F sharp minor.
Wow.
And then may just work his way back into A flat.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
That is not a closely related key.
Not a closely related key, no. So yeah, Schubert's a genius. But yeah, so that's what a modulating period kind of is, and that's what they kind of do. They set up these sort of forms, You're not really, and in practice, you're not just modulating just wherever, right? You're modulating in places that are important.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And now, again, these are just rules, these are observations.
These are observations.
They're not
yes.
rules. Not
rules. This is what other people who have changed key have done and how they have managed to do it.
And how often they do it compared to other things.
Yeah. Or sort of, yeah.
How often it's done.
Modulation, in the classical world, modulation is actually par for the course. There are actually very few compositions by the classical masters that stayed in one key the whole time. So it's considered sort of necessary. And in popular music, it's not considered as necessary, but it is definitely something that, if you can do well, can add a lot of emotional impact to what you're writing.
Ah, yes. Very good. Okay, the last thing we have to talk about would be harmonizing modulating melodies.
Okay.
Which sounds like a melodic version of what we've been talking about.
Pretty much.
Let's see what you got, Matt.
All right. So, harmonizing modulating melody. Did you get this out of Roy Francoli?
Of course I got it out of Roy Francoli.
Let me read this for a minute. Okay.
Matt, the furrow-browed theorist.
So, first, let me just make up a melody. All right, so I'm just going to be in this little key play this little melody in A minor.
Ah, good key, good key. Okay.
And we're going to try to ID the keys of the closing and opening phrase.
I'm going to take a stab.
Okay.
You say we start off in A minor?
We start off in A minor.
So at this point,
Yeah.
I think we're actually on the 5 of A minor.
Absolutely. So this is our half cadence.
Yes. But now,
Yeah.
we could...
Still A minor.
Okay.
Don't let my little chromaticism fool you.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes it's just a 7 chord.
Yeah.
7 to 5 chord, right?
Yeah.
So and then back.
Still A minor.
Couldn't that be a new leading tone though?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is this?
The 3?
3.
3 of A minor.
Yeah, which is C.
C.
So maybe we're starting on A and ending in C.
Uh-huh.
Starting in A minor, ending in C minor.
First phrase A minor, end of the second phrase C major. We're in
Yeah.
C major.
So if this is 5 to 1 in C, then our pivot chord is going to be the chord that went before that. Right? So this chord on the D is going to have to be my pivot chord.
It's maybe a 4 chord in A minor, D minor.
Maybe maybe a 4 chord in A minor reinterpreted as 2 in C major.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
maybe let's see if we can pull that off.
Ooh.
So harmonizing, I'm going to be in A.
Go for it.
1, 5.
Back to 1.
Yeah. And then oh shoot, let's see. We could maybe 6 to 5, maybe, yeah. 7 to 5. I don't know. And then so
5 to 1.
yeah, and then so 4, but now it's 2. 2, 5,
Ah,
1.
yeah. Very nice.
Yeah, pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool. So let's do that again. So 1, 5.
5.
And let's do 4 here this time. What do you say?
Uh-huh.
Half cadence.
Uh-huh.
Pivot chord. 4. That is now 2. And we're in C.
Nice.
Yeah. And then we could even go repeat, you know. But, you know, what do you have? So there you go. So we are seeing if we can ID the pivot chord, the cadential gestures, you know, like 5 to 1, you know, helping us out there. Attempt to write a bass line that fits these cadences. Okay, so I sort of did that in my head.
You kind of did, yeah.
And harmonize the rest of the melody using what you know of harmony and voice leading. So, you know, just engage your theory brain at that point, put some chords behind it, you know. You can actually create modulations out of nothing. I mean, you could have called that whole second phrase A minor and you know, could have harmonized it that way, you know, so.
2-5-1.
Yeah, and not even modulated.
Yeah.
And if you weren't good with your modulations, you might do that. It sounds fine. We can just go 2,
5.
5 and stay in A minor.
Uh-huh.
It sounded fine, right? But wasn't it really kind of cool when we went...
Yeah.
Give it a whole different sort of feel, right? A whole
Completely.
different sort of quality, you know?
Feel better.
Yeah. If this was the melody in our verse, our chorus could be in C major, right? Because we're in C major now.
That means something good happened.
Right, yeah, you know.
Not something dismal.
Yeah, or something melancholy as opposed to merely abysmal, right? Get some of those shades in there.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Right, it's not good or bad. It's not happy or sad. We're starting to, like I said, with chromaticism, we can explore more complex emotions and atmospheres. Right?
Absolutely, and that's what this is all about. Yeah.
Gosh, is there anything left to say about about that?
I think that's pretty much it.
Dare we recap this? Lightning round
Dare we recap this? Okay.
lightning round recap.
So a modulation is a change of key.
Yes.
And the easiest modulations to make are changes to keys that are closely related to the ones you're in.
Which is what these 2 episodes are all about.
Right. And those are defined as keys that are usually within an accidental away, no more than 2.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the dominant and its relative minor, or the relative minor of the tonic, or the relative major of those. You know, basically things that either have 0 key signature difference or 1, or I have also seen 2. Yeah. The easiest way to do this is with a pivot chord. A chord that is diatonic to both keys, who just sort of serves dual purpose. So 6 in the old key will be 2 in the new key. And then you will go 2, 5, 1 in the new key, and you will end up in the dominant if you do that.
Same group of notes, different function. We assign it a different name to it.
Absolutely. You can also modulate using chromatic modulation, chromatic chords, such as a 5 of 5 or 7 of 5, or 5 of 3 or 7 of 2. You use this 7 of 2, for example, to get to 2, but then you become in the key of 2. 2 becomes 1. And then you establish that key with a perfect authentic cadence, and you're in that key. And that is a chromatic modulation. Modulations also happen via sequential modulation, where you can go around melodic sequences, kind of stop wherever you want, because melodic sequences have the tendency of fuzzing up the harmony.
Yeah.
Stop wherever you want, call that 2 or 6 or whatever, and modulate that way.
Seems like a pretty reliable means for modulation.
Absolutely, yeah. Phrase modulation is when a phrase is in a particular key, but then the next phrase is in a different key. And so this is happening on the phrase level rather than on the chord level.
So I asked this earlier, and I want to make sure I got it, got it right here.
Yes.
Phrases, sequences can occur within phrases, right?
Yes. So sequences occur within phrases.
Is just the phrase modulation just a kind of zooming out and looking at a sequence, or looking at modulations from a further perspective?
Exactly, yeah. It's a sort of zoomed out perspective, looking at modulations from phrase to phrase to phrase rather than chord to chord to chord.
Got it.
Yeah. And then, of course, speaking of phrases, phrases are often put together to create things called periods, which we've talked about before, where the first one will end on a half cadence and the second phrase will end on an authentic cadence. And so they're sort of linked that way. Often these periods will modulate so that authentic cadence at the end is in a different key from the one that it started in. Right. And this is essential for things like binary form, you know, and essential for creating a structure around the keys of your music. And they will always make a sort of zoomed out level sense.
Very good.
Actually, yeah. And then, you know, we harmonize modulating melodies a little bit and show that, you know, you can really modulate in a lot of interesting places.
Yeah.
You know, but the important thing is to know where your leading tones are, because those are the keys to where you're going to be in a new key. No pun intended.
Or was it? Or was it?
Or was it? Or was it?
That's killer, man.
Yeah.
Oh, and going back a little bit, we talked about the abrupt modulation kind of happening out of nowhere a little bit.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
like the gear shift, like living on a prayer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then there's the gear shift and the
Yeah.
abrupt modulation, where you just decide you're in a new key.
Which is also a type of direct modulation.
Right. Yeah. The terminology gets a little fuzzy.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we did a cool example of harmonizing modulating melodies.
Yeah, right, yeah. Free composing off the top of my head.
You just whipped it
What podcast host, other than yours truly, would compose a modulating period for you?
Sell it, Matt. Sell it. Hey, Matt, I want to thank you, man, because I know you're not feeling good today. And
I am good, man. This has been good for me.
I'm glad you came out, and I'm sure our listeners appreciate it as well. Is there anything else you want to say about modulating?
Don't think of modulation as some abstract, bookish, theoretical thing that you could do.
Mm-hmm.
Do your best to make it a part of the music you write and the music you play, and just see how cool everything becomes. Because once you have learned how to effectively modulate and are good at it, it opens up whole new worlds to the kinds of music you can do.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay, well, I think that's all we have to say about that, and keep on listening. The next episode is going to be something else, I guarantee it.
I can almost certainly guarantee it. We're done with this.
Yeah. We are done.
We're done. Till we modulate to further away keys, and that's even more complicated.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. We'll start practicing some of our chord progressions.
Yeah, right now.
It's getting pretty. It's getting
It's getting intense.
Easy. Yes. All right. Thanks again, peeps.
By the way, we still have more to say about modulations, so keep listening. And tell a friend about us. Don't forget, you can support us at patreon.com/musicstudent101. And if you have questions or comments, you can reach us at info@musicstudent101.com.